Welcome everyone to week 4 of the Beat Juggle composition start to finish bootcamp. This is our final week of content, but we still have a video feedback week next week. And this week, we're going to talk about transitions and finishing touches. And essentially, we're going to talk about like the overall structure and putting together all the patterns that we've covered, or not all of them, but the ones that you choose to put into a routine. How we get sort of the whole arrangement put together and get it flowing and that kind of thing. So today is going to be a little bit lighter on technique and patterns. There's still a lot of patterns, but they're all transition ones, which are pretty easy. Even for the absolute beginners, most of these will be pretty easy, but it's just it's the ideas and the sort of concepts of transitions, how to do them, where to do them, that kind of thing. Giving yourself options because not every transition works in every juggle or on every beat. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to be revisiting a lot of stuff. So I think there's only one new beat juggle today. But I wanted to go over some of the previous ones and look at them from just like a different perspective, not like a technical pattern perspective, but we're going to look at it from like a transition perspective or a structure perspective, depending on when they come up today. Beat juggle structure, we're going to talk about that a little bit. I brought it up a little bit in week 1, but I wanted to revisit now that I've shown you different types of patterns and that kind of thing. And then I'm going to show you the full beat juggle for the beginners or anybody who wants to learn the full juggle that has all the patterns from the last 3 weeks, and an intro, transition, and outro. That's what we're adding today. And then we'll go into transitions, in and out of breakdowns. Then we'll get into the question answer and the homework feedback. And yeah, let's get to it. So beat juggle structure. So basically, in week 1, I talked about it. I drew a little diagram, if you remember, that is sort of a typical beat juggle structure, I would say. It's like probably the most common, where you have an intro, some setup patterns, and then a breakdown, and then it goes one step further into like a knockout punch, or a more heavy breakdown, and then an outro. I'd say that's the most common style of breakdown, because or style of beat juggle arrangement, because a lot of times when you're doing juggles, a lot of times they're going to be in the context of a battle, and typically, for one reason or another, the time limits are going to kind of dictate that you keep it close to like a minute. And usually what I say is, like, because the breakdown and the knockout punch are like the most important parts, you want to sort of weight your juggle time towards that. So usually you have an intro setup that's not too long, and then your breakdown and your knockout punch is about half of the time or something like that. So this is like a pretty good structure that is sort of the shortest way that you can get like a setup, and you can get like a fairly solid breakdown and knockout punch in there. And yeah, I just call that the standard beat juggle structure. That's sort of the one that is usually I try to shoot for. I try to shoot for one that has like at least a couple sections of a breakdown. Like usually it's usually having only like one short breakdown. It has to be really, really strong for it to be worth it. So yeah, usually having a couple is good, and then your intro, setup, and outro are standard and sort of necessary. So that's the standard one. But we've seen some other juggles that had different structures, and we're going to revisit them, and I'll sort of break down how I look at the structure and how I listen to it. So the other style of juggle structure would be like a minimalist structure that basically takes the breakdown and the knockout punch and puts it together in one. So you don't really have like breakdown 1 and breakdown 2. It's just kind of one breakdown. So that one would be like an intro, setup, and then your breakdown knockout in one, and then your outro. Usually that's if you're making like a really short juggle, either because you need to fit into a short time limit, or because maybe it's just so strong that that's all it needs. It doesn't need any filler at all. You can also do another style of juggle that we've seen in this boot camp as well, is a breakdown heavy style. And this one's also like fairly common, I would say. We've seen it a few times, and usually like if you see juggles that have a pretty long, elaborate breakdown, it's structured something like this, where it's like intro and then set of patterns, and then they're just hitting you with a bunch of breakdown like variations. So I just shortened it to BD for now, but like breakdown 1, breakdown 2, breakdown 3, breakdown 4, and then your outro. And usually, breakdown 4 would probably be like your knockout punch, or you're shooting to make that your strongest section. And then, you can go even crazier and go for like more of a complex structure, something like this. And we're going to rewatch a juggle that has this structure, where it's like an intro, and then it has one setup, and then another setup, and then it has a breakdown, and then another breakdown, and then I would call it like a bridge, where you sort of have a transition mid breakdown, and then they have 3 more breakdowns and then an outro. Some people can probably guess which juggle that we've seen that followed that structure. And then there we go, Babu's juggle, exactly. And then finally, like a lot of times the structure is kind of dictated. Like you don't really, I don't come up with the structure ahead of time and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a structure that has 4 breakdowns, or or 1 breakdown, or whatever. It's usually 2 things. One is the time limit. That's a huge one in battles specifically. Is either you're going to be working with a hard time limit, meaning you have exactly 1 minute, like it's a DMC supremacy type of thing, or an elimination battle or something like that, where it's a really short format. So you have 1 minute. And it's like you have to fit it into 1 minute or you get disqualified. So that's a hard limit. Or you can have sort of like a soft limit on your juggle, where you have a 6-minute routine, and in theory you could make a 6-minute juggle, but you don't want to just automatically lose, so you don't do that. So typically in a 6-minute routine you want to have 4 sections in your juggle, or sorry, in your routine. So you're shooting for around 90 seconds, like per section. And then depending on your transitions, intros, outros, it could be a little shorter, it could be a little longer. So, you're still going for that, like a certain specific time limit, but it's not, you have a little bit more flexibility. You could, take 10 seconds off the next section if you needed to, that kind of thing. And then the other thing that dictates your juggle structure usually is just how many patterns you come up with, like how inspired you were, or how much heat is in the beat that you're using. If you just come up with 1 breakdown knockout punch and it's solid, but you can't come up with any more, like you don't need multiple breakdowns in a routine. Sometimes just having 1 solid breakdown is enough. Just from my routines, like these 2 are both a little bit weird, like oddball structures, but if you've seen my guillotine routine from DMC Online, where I did the tone pitching stuff, that one is it's sort of like 2 breakdowns, but it's basically just like a very quick setup and then a breakdown. It's very, very concise. And then another routine that is also a little oddball is my Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's like a one record beat juggle, and it basically goes intro, setup, and then one breakdown, and that one breakdown is like enough for that routine. Yeah, so sometimes if you have one breakdown or knock you a punch and can't come up with any more, that's enough. So just go with like the minimalist kind of structure, just like intro, setup, breakdown, with the knock you a punch together, and then out. But if you have a ton of great ideas, like if you have like, you come up with 4 different breakdowns and you're trying to strip it down, you're trying to cut some out, like, but no matter what, you're just like, oh man, all of these are good, and they complement each other, that kind of thing, then you might go with like a more breakdown heavy structure or the more complex structure, one of those things. So yeah, that's sort of the idea behind beat juggle structures. So rather than just talking about the structures, we're going to revisit a few routines here. One, like all 4 of these examples I took from actual ones that we covered here. Now the first one is my juggle, my cypress cell juggle, and this one is there's tons of juggles that follow the standard structure, but this is one of my like early juggles that I did. Like, yeah, this is my second. This is after I won my first national title, before I won any world titles. But this one follows like, yeah, just a pretty straightforward standard juggle structure. The breakdown timing is not standard. It's not a swing pattern like we've been learning, but we're just going to look at the structure for now. And I'm just going to, play through it, and I'll pause in each section. So just to check again, so the standard structure, we got intro, setup, breakdown, knockout punch, outro. Those are the 5 sections. So we'll go through the 5 sections. So right off the bat, we got the intro. That's the intro right there. And then, I use those baby scratches to kind of segue or transition into our setup patterns. And then I do a little break transition here, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes. And then we get into the breakdown. And then here's the knockout punch. And then the outro. Which I'm also in this case using to transition to the next part of the routine. But yeah, there's the 5 different parts of the routine. The intro, just playing the track. Setup pattern. Those are the setup patterns that I showed you in week 1, or a variation of them. The breakdown, that's where I changed the tempo of the track. And then the knockout punch is where I added something musically, that like whistle sound. I don't even know what it is, what sample that is in the track. But I also added a lot technically. It's a platter off and reverse pattern. So I really tried to spice it up, but keep the same rhythm and everything. And then finally, the outro is just playing the track again, and yeah, just playing it like normal. Is it a horse? Oh, it's like a horse neighing, like pitched up. That's crazy. Okay, well, that's the horse sound. I added the horse for the knockout punch. So it was a good strategy. All right, and then next juggle, we're gonna revisit the structure of. This is like the minimalist structure. So this one, just checking it out again, we got the intro, setup, and then the breakdown, knockout punch together, and then an outro. So this one's very like concise. So we got the intro.
So what is the purpose of you versus me? When you versus me, you come versus me. You will be shocked and amazed. Just a brand new thing they call the human beatbox craze.
Got the human beatbox craze. This is a sick intro. One of the reasons why this Juggle he can pull off the minimalist thing is because everything is so tight and everything is so dope in it. Like the intro just like, you know, it's basically like he found his own name in a track and you know, made sort of like a you know, braggadocio type of diss intro, and then goes into the setup patterns. There's a little power down transition there, but again, the setup patterns are just like, the setup patterns even kind of develop and are almost funkier and more hardcore than a lot of people's breakdowns are. But then he gets into the breakdown. And then that's the outro, just playing the track again. So yeah, that breakdown is very dope. Even though it's basically a swing breakdown, sort of like it's the same rhythm that we've been doing in a lot of our patterns, but he found like a really unique track, this beatbox track, and so that's why he's doing a lot of like the Upfader transforms. That those patterns are kind of tailored to this song. You wouldn't really be able to do them exactly like that on just any beat, even though I gave you some variations, some similar patterns last week to try anyways. But yeah, you know, just a super unique funky breakdown. Got it sounds musical, sounds cool, tempo switch, body tricks, yeah, everything. So that's the minimalist Juggle, where the whole thing is like barely a minute. So yeah, that's our second structure. Our third structure, intro, setup, breakdown, bridge. No. Sorry, that's the complex one. Sorry, our third one, intro, setup, breakdown, outro. So like 4 breakdowns essentially. And that one we got. So that's his intro, basically. You know, there's a lot of body tricks in there, and this is like sort of a, you know, an intro that almost only the X-Men can do. It doesn't, you know, it's not super locked in on time, but he's doing a lot of crazy body tricks, and you know, nobody else was doing that kind of stuff at the time. So this was the intro. Setup pattern. Breakdown. So that is the first breakdown. Second breakdown starts here. Breakdown 3. then breakdown 4, the knockout punch. And then the outro, a bit of a unique outro, but yeah, so that one definitely way more focused on the breakdown patterns, gets so many different types of breakdowns in there, and each level of the breakdown kind of goes like one step further, a little deeper, a little bit cooler every single time. And then finally, we have the complex structure. So this one's very unique, very specific to this juggle. You could do a juggle structure like this, but I'd say it's hard to come up with this many patterns that sound cool, firstly, but also the time limits. It's really hard to justify this long on a juggle in most battles. But this one was for the ITFB juggle category, and the rounds were actually 2 minutes long. So it kind of made sense in a beat juggle only battle with 2-minute rounds to, come up with a 2-minute juggle. So that's the Blind Alley. So let's just break down the structure a little bit. So this one's got multiple setups, or what I would consider setup patterns. He sort of has like different sequences of them and different breakdowns, and then sort of a transition in the middle of his breakdowns, which is pretty unique as well. So our intro. Setup pattern starting now. And then setup patterns, part 2. Breakdown starting now. Breakdown part 2. And then here's like our transition sort of thing, bridge transition mid breakdown. So the reason I call this like a bridge or transition is because he's not actually like creating a beat with this section. It doesn't have, there's no snare in it. It's just sort of like, bouncing back and forth between a couple notes. I think musically what it does is sort of builds tension, where it's like you're waiting for like the next part. You want the snare, you want the beat to kick back in. So it's sort of like this like build of tension right before he drops into breakdown part 3. Breakdown part 4. Breakdown part 5. And then his outro. There we go. So that's our little recap on the beat juggle structures. I just thought that would be a good thing to do, to just like really, go over and talk about the exact structure and arrangement of juggles, or how I look at it, and hopefully it makes sense to other people too, because I think it's something that it helps to just like be pointed out the exact sections and what you're listening for and stuff. It's not necessarily intuitive with listening to the structure and arrangement from a beat juggle perspective, as opposed to like a song perspective. Anyways, so hopefully that is interesting. 1 second here. Okay, so there we go. It wasn't loading on the screen there, but now we got it. So, the first thing that we're going to do on the turntables is go over the full structure of the beat juggle, the beginner beat juggle, or the full juggle that we've been piecing together. So basically, let's just do like a little recap here. So the overall, each section that we've learned so far is, we start with the setup pattern that was like this. Right, so that was week 1. That's the homework, the setup pattern, and then the breakdown part 1 and 2. So this one is actually kind of following the Mrs. Sinister structure, where we actually have kind of 4 sections of the breakdown. It's pretty long, but I wanted to, give you multiple parts, give you something that's like nice to practice. Like, hopefully you can practice this over, weeks or months to come, and get it so that it's like flowing and feels like natural, that kind of thing. And you get a sense of like the progression in the juggle. So the first part of the breakdown is... Right? Second part of the breakdown, we add this note and the wicked. And then there's a little outro thing. We're actually going to change that today to get it to flow into our next part. Our next section that we had, breakdown part 3, was the strobe or chase. And then the final breakdown 4, is the faderless strobe, chase, whatever you want to call it. Cool. So those are all the pieces that we learned. But we didn't learn all the glue between those pieces and how to put it together yet. So there is, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 4 sections that we're going to add to this routine, but not full sections like we have. They're just the structure of the routine. So the very first one, this one's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, but basically we're just going to add an intro to the routine. So for this one, we're going to start on the first key point, and it's going to have So that's the intro part of the beat that we used last week. And you're going to let that play for 4 bars.
Turn it up. Yeah. Break it. Break it down. Break it.
So we're just going to let it play for 4 bars and then go directly into our setup patterns. This is a way of doing like an intro and a setup that I really like. Like I like a setup that just goes directly into the patterns and flows like musically like that. You know, an example of a setup that I don't like at all. I'll just show you, but I see this a lot. I hear this a lot.
Turn it up. Yeah. Break it. Break it down like this. Break it down like this. Break it down like this.
Like it's looping way too much. It's very repetitive. It's sort of like taking a lot to get to the point, and also after a certain point, and I think this probably goes for most of you guys, most people aren't really impressed by just looping like back and forth, you know, at 2 beats at a time or something. Like it's not, you know, it's not gonna set you apart from anyone. So a better way, a smoother way musically is just to play it and go right into the setup patterns on beat. It's not, yeah, it's a little tricky, but it's not too bad. So I'm basically going to add like 1 baby scratch over here and then quickly backspin. So the cool thing about this beat is if we start it here, and I'm using my sticker at the needle here, but if you use that 12 o'clock, wherever, it's going to be at the same place when it gets to our juggle point.
Turn it up. Yeah. Break it. Break it down like.
So when I bring it back to the needle there, so we let it play basically 1 or 4 beats past it, and then we bring it back and we're going to start juggling right there. But if you cue up the intro of the beat, the part we're going to juggle is going to be at our sticker as well. So I'll show the intro one more time.
Turn it up. Yeah. Break it. Break it down. Break it. Break it. Yeah. Break it.
Cool. So we got the intro right into the setup, and yeah, I was actually holding off from that def switch because I'm trying to make this as straightforward as possible. But of course, if you're at the level, if you can do fills, you can while the intro is playing, you don't just have to sit there. You can do like.
Turn it up. Yeah. Break it down.
You know, you can do stuff like that, like anything basically.
Turn it up. Yeah. Break it. Break it down.
You know, you don't like kind of how Babu is doing in his intro too. You can spice it up if you want. That's totally up to you and where your skill level is. But realistically, you're not going to win or lose a battle, or you're not going to win anyone over or lose anybody because you did extra fills in the intro. It sort of doesn't really matter, you know, it's just personal preference, but the part you want to focus on is like the breakdowns, the structure, that kind of thing. So anyways, that's our intro. And then we ended with a break, just like we did in week 1. And then now we're going to add one element before our breakdown. We're going to add a transition. So instead of just going like just instead of going abruptly into the breakdown like that, we're going to add a couple taps per side starting on the wicked. So we're going to add this before the breakdown. We're going to add 4 of those. And then a baby scratch. Cool. So putting that in context, I'll do the last few of the setup patterns, and then I'll do the transition into the breakdown. Got it? So yeah, the only addition there is a transition. So to me, it just sort of like kind of builds nicely. It introduces the sort of tempo and rhythm that we're gonna start juggling in, and sort of eases people into it, so that, you know, this is sort of like you're getting people's head nodding at the right speed and stuff just before you even get into the full breakdown. So you're just going. You know, that's really important. You always want to kind of like hold people's hand and direct them to the new tempo and stuff. If you just like smash them with a brand new tempo, that's how you lose people, and that's how you give beat juggling a bad name. And then people like go home and they write Google reviews and say, you know, beat juggling sucks. You don't want that. So we want to like, you know, make it really like smooth and kind of we're introducing like the tempo switch before we're introducing like the full beat and the full breakdown. So that's our second element that we're adding. Now, the third element is going from our breakdown into our chase patterns. And for this one, I simplified it slightly from what I was planning, because I've been sort of like watching the homework and everything, and just sort of I've been trying to scale it appropriately to the level of people. So instead of doing we're not going to do that anymore. It sounds cool, but there's an easier transition that's going to get us into our chase pattern a little easier. So for our second half of the breakdown, it goes like this. Okay, so we do that 3 times, and then on our 4th time, we're going to do this. We're just going to tap like that. We can do it with one. We'll probably do it with one hand. It's funny that you mentioned Spectacular, because this element is actually from Spectacular's Juggle. I'm going to cover, you know, a couple of the transitions in the context of other routines after I show this, but this part is a Spectacular inspired transition to this section. So, basically, I'm going to go the second half of the breakdown and the transition into the chase, and you're going to hear how it works, and then I'll explain a little bit more. I'm not going to do the whole chase for now, but I'll do that one more time. Okay, so essentially we do our breakdown 3 times, And then instead of doing the fancy fill that we did before, we're just tapping from the third beat. So it's this hi-hat. And we're going to let it say break it down like. It's a nice little segue. But this transition is really important. And I actually really like how this came together. This doesn't always happen like this. But basically, while you're doing this, if you pay attention, while I go... And then this is where our strobe or chase is going to begin. And while we're doing this and letting this record play, it's actually going to end up in almost the exact spot that we need it to, right on beat. So watch this record when I do that. So I'm not even touching this record the whole time. And then as soon as you're done the 1, 2, 3, 4, like your chase, your strobe is like right there on beat. And yeah, that's just like a cool little, like, I don't know, cool little happenstance thing that happened where sometimes that is why you would do a transition a certain way, or like, you know, sometimes you'll just figure out something like that and it's like that's just so smooth. Like it's like, you know, instead of having to like forward spin or like find the part you need to chase or something, you just come up with a transition where it just goes over there. And just like to make it like slightly more interesting, like the way like you can do it with one hand, but the way I'm doing it when I'm usually doing this also to keep my hand occupied because it doesn't need to do anything over here, is I'm doing like a, you know, so I'll do like a two-handed tap, just swapping my hands, just like a mini body trick, I suppose. And then the final addition to our juggle. So we have that transition, our transition. Okay, recap. Intro, we have our transition to our breakdown, our transition from our regular breakdown to our strobe. And then now we're going to add an outro after our strobe. And so for this one is, you know, realistically, you don't need to do it like this, but I wanted to add something like just slightly interesting to give you something to practice. And there's something a little bit cool about the way this ends as well that will be nice for practicing. But basically because this is such a long, like sort of chase thing, I'm going to do it and go directly to the outro. The outro is going to be a fade out, like echo out, like just a baby scratch pullbacks. I'm releasing it just so it just sounds more like an echo than if you go. So yeah, just going straight into those baby pullbacks, and then we're gonna drop the beat on this side, and I'm gonna use the cue point for this. I think this is like, you could do this, you know, a number of ways, but because this happens to end on the very last note of the beat and there's nothing after it anyways, cue pointing it and dropping it is good. But also it's just sort of like, realistically, this is sort of like a practical way. I'd say a lot of times, like when you're juggling on DVS, you're probably just going to like hit the cue and drop the track. That's like a common outro thing to do. And it's its own muscle memory, so it's a good thing to practice. So here is the strobe into the outro. Got it? Does that make sense? Now, the cool thing about this outro that I kind of like is that if you cue it right on your sticker at 12 o'clock and you drop it, your juggle actually loops. And then if you're practicing it, you can just practice from the outro back into the intro, and you can just infinitely loop this whole juggle. The outro of the juggle is the intro of the juggle. So for just like, for a practice, from a practice perspective, you guys can just, keep doing it. Yeah. And you can just, you can get lost in it and just practice the juggle forever and never stop until you're perfect. Yeah. The Vect Vortex, you're stuck now. Yeah. So that's all the moving parts of the juggle. Yeah, it's a perfect circle. Now I'm going to attempt to do it all clean in one go. It's not difficult technically, but sometimes remembering all the little bits can be a little tricky. But yeah, I'm gonna do the full structure of it. I timed it earlier. It comes in just over 90 seconds. So this is a pretty long juggle, but I think it's cool because it gives you a setup pattern, transitions, multiple breakdown styles, and multiple chases. Like it just kind of has everything in it that makes it good, like practice drill routine to try and get down. And then, hopefully some of you guys get it, and it just helps reinforce a lot of your foundations and that. And then maybe you can start trying it on other beats. You can basically take the exact same patterns, find another boom bap beat, and see how they work. And maybe they'll work exactly. Maybe you adjust them, and then you start creating your own routine. Anyways, let's do it.
Turn it up. Yeah. Break it. Break it down. Break it. Break it. Break it. Turn it up. Yeah. Break it. Break it down. Break it.
I'm not going to do the full thing again, but that's the idea, is that even after the intro, you could just go straight back into the set of patterns right there, and you have the endless practice juggle, the infinite juggle. Cool. So that is the full juggle, the full beginner juggle for this boot camp. Yeah, and I'd say at this point, it's not super beginner. Like it's beginner after you've pieced it all together. But this is like a pretty solid juggle structure. There is some stuff like if you're gonna enter a battle or something, you might want to push a few things a little further, have it slightly less repetitive, but yeah. Ooh, that's a good question, Stu. If you if you make a mistake in a live setting, what's the best way to try to recover? Well, the first thing, this is what I always tell my battlers when I'm coaching them, is if you make a mistake live in a battle, no, you didn't. Don't let on that you made a mistake. Don't you it was all planned. It was all meant to be that way. Yeah, the worst thing you can do is like let it affect you, like your face and that kind of thing, because man, I can't tell you, in battle history, like so many battles have been won and lost just on someone's like physical, like they make a mistake and they're just like or like throw their hands in the air or something like that. Like, yeah, I could do a whole class on battles where like the person whose like body language looked defeated, like basically beat themselves, even though like they probably were better still, but they just looked defeated, whereas the other person who made more mistakes like just sold it on their face, like check out Mixmaster Mike and like, watch him perform and then like listen, like he'll go off beat sometimes, but will he ever look like it? No, he's like, looks like he's like gonna murder you or something like that. And it just like, yeah. And it, 90% of people, unless they're like a hardcore turntablist, even other DJs, they don't necessarily like catch the little mistakes. The ones that like will catch and they'll really like stick in your head. But a lot of people like, and this is something I notice, like even judging live battles, is when it's a live performance, the mistakes are very like fleeting. Like an online performance, you can rewind it and it's there forever. But in a live battle, it's like if someone like made a little mistake, they go off beat a little bit, but then the next like 4 or 8 bars they're dropping fire, then like nobody thinks about that mistake anymore. It doesn't. The judges don't even. It just sort of like gets sort of pushed to the back of your head. It's only if it's something very, very like obvious and terrible. And sometimes that happens, and then same thing goes. I'd say usually what you want to do is like kind of have a bit of a instinct of like how long the mistake or how bad or how long it was more than how bad. If your mistake is like short, just like reset to the nearest pattern that started before that. Like if you messed up the first bar of your breakdown, just restart your breakdown from the wicked, like that part. If you messed up, in the second half of the breakdown, and is a little longer, then maybe just like go to the chase part of this or something and start with a strobe, just skip the section and go the next one. Yeah, that's kind of how I would adapt to it. My biggest mistake in a battle. I've got some funny ones. Honestly, one of my craziest ones, like in terms of like, this is due to nerves probably. My first world final, the finals of my first world final, 2012 Supremacy. If I didn't even know this, I didn't even catch this until I got the DVD and I watched it back, and I actually did my routine with one of the records on +8 and one on 0, and they're supposed to both be on 0. So I did my routine 8% faster than I'd ever done it, only on one side too. So like, I don't know, I just didn't realize because I was nervous. But it's probably good that I didn't know, because it goes with what I said, where, if you made a mistake, no, you didn't. So I didn't even know I made a mistake. So I obviously didn't act like I made a mistake, and I won. Is against Richie Roughtone in the final. Is my "Do I Have to Tell You That You're Whack" routine. But yeah, and who knows, maybe doing it 8% faster actually made it come off like more like more aggressive or something. I don't know. So yeah, stuff like that happens. But yeah, I've also had, like, I remember my first I think it's my first Canadian final win, or my first regional wind, but I had a beat juggle with Where's My Mind by the Pixies. And during the breakdown, I I lost it like right at the start of the breakdown. Like I'd screwed it up and I had to reset it. Like I was just saying, like I screwed it up and then I reset. But like the pattern just before that, I did like this cool like snare fill or something, and the crowd started reacting. They're like, "Oh!" And like they didn't even know that I made a mistake. Like nobody in the venue would have like heard that I made a mistake because it was like during like a a crowd reaction kind of thing. It could have even almost seemed like I paused to let them react or something. So yeah, biggest thing is like don't let it like get to your head and stuff, and just push through. That's just part of live battling. Everybody makes mistakes in it, and yeah, the more you can just let it like roll off, the better. And yeah, you'll beat a lot of people by just pretending that you're perfect. Anyways, so that's our beat juggle, our full beat juggle, and that's our structure. The luck of champions, exactly. There's a little bit of luck involved. It's true. So that's our beat juggle structure. Now transitions. Transitions. These are the unsung hero of juggles. These are the glue that makes everything flow and makes it feel like a cohesive piece of music. So the most typical and common and necessary part of transition to have in a beat juggle is going to be before your breakdowns and after your breakdowns. So anytime, my rule is generally anytime you're going to switch tempos, you need a transition. Because like if you just think about like if you're playing a song and like people are dancing and then you just go minus 30% and then plus 30% or whatever, like people are going to be like, what is going on? But if you like, I'm sure a lot of the DJs who have played out, like open format DJs, you've used transition tracks before, which they do have a tempo change, but it's not like abrupt and crazy. It's like actually kind of like leading people to the new tempo. We're trying to essentially emulate that with our patterns. In order to make transitions between them. So anytime you're about to transition tempos, you have to have a transition. And then let me see. Also sometimes going into a setup pattern, sometimes going between breakdown sections. We saw that in Babu's juggle there. We had a little transition like halfway between his breakdowns. So you're going to have transitions in other places too. And I tried to categorize a few types of common transitions. So we're going to go over ones that we saw and just focus on the transition specifically. And there's a few just sort of like types. Tap transitions is a very common one, using tap pauses. That we use 2 of those in the juggle that we just did. Classic transitions. These are ones that are like very simple, easy, tried and true transitions. We use 1 of them in the juggle routine. Loop transitions. These are based on like backspinning or looping, but using a little method to change tempo or something like that. And then just like other miscellaneous transitions, I've got a couple other ideas that are just kind of interesting and versatile ways to transition mid beat juggle. So that is what we're gonna talk about, and I think I have 11 transitions or something. These are going to be pretty short. They're not technical, but yeah. The very first one, the very first tap transition that we got here was in Mrs. Sinis's routine. And we're not going to watch the full juggles now because you've seen them multiple times and you have the links. So we're just going to focus on the transition. So this one is basically taking a regular loop and then going into a slower loop. Yeah. Oops. So so for that one, pretty simple. But essentially, if you get like a loop going somewhere on the beat, the way that Sinister does it is he starts. Where does he start?
Wicked.
On the wicked. I think we're gonna just start on the one though. Just getting a loop going somewhere in the track. You could use the wicked.
Wicked. Wicked. Wicked. Wicked.
And then you're going to take that exact loop, but then add taps to it. So what we're doing is, I think why this transition is effective is because we're only changing one thing. Like, I think a good transition usually tries not to change too abruptly or change too many things. So we're taking like the exact loop and the exact same order of notes, but all we're adding is the tempo change by itself, and we're not changing or adding anything else. And that's why it makes it like something that people can understand. And when we're talking about transitions are like, I don't know, almost a way to think about them is like transitions are, that's not the part you're trying to like impress DJs with. It's like it's the part that you're trying to like not lose the crowd with, or it's like, you know, the people who aren't DJs and aren't turntablists and don't know, you know, they're just listening for like musicality and stuff. You're doing the transitions for them, not for, you know, it's not gonna make anybody like go crazy as a DJ when you have a dope transition, but you know, it's gonna make the total package of your beat juggle sound really good. So for this one, just looping on the one, 2 beats, and then tapping it to slow down. And you can practice that one starting before the one as well.
Wicked. 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 Wicked.
So that's that's like the, you know, first one of the more simple ways to go into a breakdown tempo. One of the only other details I would say is when you're doing that, make sure that you do it like on beat or at the right number of bars. So if you're looping it, loop it like 4 times or 8 times and then start it. So like, I was trying to count it, but yeah, I did 4 loops and then did it. You don't want to do something like this. I did it after 5 loops there. That's no good. Make sure it's all 4s and 8s. That makes it a little bit easier for people to follow. So that is our first tap transition. And then that's a good question, Def Switch. Yeah, I think there is. I think there are examples of transitions that get people really hype. Yeah, I'd have to fish them out. I don't. The one that we've went over that comes to mind is Craze's Do the James, where he does this boom cut to cut to cut doom cut to cut to cut boom, and then he goes into he does this like really funky transition, and you can tell like people are already into it before he even drops into the juggle. But yeah, transitions mid juggle that do that, there definitely is. Like that's like the ideal, but yeah, I'd have to gather those. That's for another boot camp, I guess. Okay, next one, Spectacular's tap transition. This one appears in our routine.
get to the point.
Yeah. So that one again, simple, pretty straightforward. So for this, you're essentially going to be like playing part of the track.
Break it down like, break it down like, break it down like, break it down like.
You're gonna slow it down going into the one. So, like if I was looping it like that, I would do it on the off side, and on this one, this one actually works well because it has the vocal.
Break it down like.
Has to break it down like that's kind of a good spot to do it. But yeah, essentially just looping it.
Break it down like. Break it down. Down like. Break it down like.
Yeah, and just go into it like that. You'd still start the pattern on this side though. So yeah, I'll do it a couple times. Try and get some clean ones for you.
Break it down like. Break it, break it, break it down like. Break it down like.
Cool. That's the first example. I'll do it again.
Break it down. Break it down. Break it down. Break it down like.
There we go. So yeah, just sort of like playing. You're essentially just playing it
Break it down like.
and sort of slowing it down into the one of the breakdown. So we're kind of bending it down a little bit. Yes, it does, Ian. Ian asked if the timing fit to use a triplet breakdown as a fill at full speed to change tempo. Yes, it does. You're getting ahead. We're gonna see that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. 6 more transitions, and I'll show you how to do that. So that's another simple tap transition, and then this last one. This is the Mad Lion Akakabi juggle, and you're gonna recognize this one because this one's straight from the routine. Yeah, and actually, that one, listen to the crowd for that transition. Yeah, like the crowd's like already reacting at that transition. So there's a good example, you know? Sometimes it's just like, yeah, just the way you go into the transition just like builds this like hype and tension. That's kind of the ideal transition, but at the very least you want it to just like, you know, add flow to your routine. So for this one, it's straight from the routine. It's yeah. So you typically just like go from stopping one side. That's not clean. Yeah, and then add like a little baby scratch after the wickeds. That to transition into the pattern. So yeah, just doing taps on each side, just like a single tap basically, 2 notes per side. So those are our 3 tap transitions, and then we're gonna give you 3 of the classic transitions. So just another thing, the tap transitions are almost exclusively, I would say, going to be for going from normal speed into a breakdown. You wouldn't use them too often to go out of a breakdown, except I can think of one example. The spectacular one is you can use a version of that out of a strobe. So just switching it up and adding some taps before you drop it at regular speed, that can be effective. But yeah, in general, these transitions are a little bit more for your intro, like going into a breakdown. And then these next ones, all of these ones. All of these ones are for into a breakdown or out of a breakdown, and sometimes, middle of a breakdown or setup or something. This first one, this is a classic, and it is also in the routine. Oh, what's in the box? Records. This is before I won any world titles. I couldn't afford milk crates, so it just had cardboard boxes back then. Hard times. Okay, here's the transition. Right there. Burr. Yeah, I got the reference. Death Switch. The break transition. Yeah. So we do that that's how we get out of our setup pattern in the juggle. There's a few different ways you can do it. So in our routine, we do a we just stop it right there. But you could stop it like do it on the snare. Stop it right on the one. That's something that, like, a good way of experimenting, incorporating your breaks into transitions, but always like try to break and then get ready for your transition as smoothly as possible. Usually it's better to break on the side that you're not going to start your breakdown on. Something like that. Any tips to get back to it? Ooh, yeah. So I guess getting it restarted can be tricky. So the first thing is like getting used to breaking, cutting off, and starting it like right away. So to do that, you have to have this record in place. But notice how basically like I had this record started like either in the silence or while I'm baby scratching to restart. Yeah. Depending what side you're doing the break on, like for the left side, you can see I like to use my thumb a lot here. That's a nice hack. That's something I miss about having the dual start-stop turntables, like the Stanton ones or the old reloops, is I would use my thumb on this side as well. It's actually way better than having to go over here. This side's a little bit trickier because you have to do like you have to kind of hop, start and hop. Yeah. Also, like restarting and backspinning right away is also sort of a muscle memory you get. Yeah. So yeah, try to practice like breaking in different places. So the one in our routine, we break on the one and then you can do the two like I did. You can do the one. like that. Usually you do like a faster loop before doing it on the 1 maybe, so that you're breaking on beat. That's all breaking on like the follower side. You could do it on the leader. And then this is going to be slightly different though. Like it's probably a good thing to practice this as well. This is a good skill to like do the break, and then you're going to start your breakdown on that same side. So I'll do it again. Yeah, so you could even just practice that. Yeah, if you can get that down, just breaking, restart, break, restart. You get that, you practice that in a loop, and you'll get used to restarting it and backspinning right away. There you go. I didn't even think of that before, but that's a good drill to practice it. Break, close fader, start, pull back. Break, close fader, start, pull back. Yeah. So you're almost doing this, like break and start, but you want to close the fader first. Yeah. There's like your muscle memory for it. But yeah, practice putting your breaks on different spots on both sides. Etc. You know, so break. I'd say as a drill or something, breaking on the 2, on follower side is going to be the easiest, and then leader side, then break on the 1 and between the 1 and the 2, and then breaking on the 1. That's the hardest one, because you have to get this muscle memory of like release and break right away. Yeah. Another drill, this is kind of a fun one. It's hard to do, but you know, like break, just looping a break on the 1. That's like another way. Yeah, there's a few different ways to practice start-stop patterns. Yeah. An easier version, okay, that'd be a pretty hard mode. An easier one might be this. Yeah. So there is your break transition, and a bunch of variations. But yeah, I'd say, you know, the main one to practice is the one that is in the routine. That's the main practice pattern for that. And then next, for our classic transitions, we had the long pause. There we go. Sometimes I call that transition like the tempo reset, because essentially, like, musically what it does is like you're juggling at a certain tempo, like the original tempo of the track, and then you stop long enough to sort of reset. So like, you know, if you imagine people head nodding to your thing, and then you stop, and it like stops their head nod, and then you restart it. you reset it at the new speed, and that can be a perfectly viable transition. It's a classic. Yeah, a lot of people use it. A-Track used it in a few routines, shortcuts right there. But yeah, so you're essentially just going. Just like that. It's very, very simple. Again, this isn't very technical today. It's more like conceptual, but just the tempo reset. This one's super good as well out of breakdowns and out of chases. One of my pet peeves with a chase or strobe is when people just kind of do this. They just slam it out of the strobe, and it's, it kind of is a little bit jarring when it gets back up to speed. So I'd rather something like this. Just pause it for like a beat, take a breath. That's like literally what I do sometimes. If I'm trying to do that, I just stop it, take a breath, and then release it. And then that's like usually that's enough time to reset the tempo. So that's your tempo reset transition for classic transitions. And then the last transition, last but not least, this is the baby scratch classic transition. I like that one because it's super exaggerated. Yeah. So for this one, basically, we're going to do a baby scratch. And this is one of the most common ones, but this is one of the most commonly messed up one. If you guys mess this up now, after this bootcamp, after me pointing this out, then I'm going to haunt you in the afterlife. So don't screw it up. So basically, the point of the baby scratch transition is to introduce the speed change before you introduce the beat or the breakdown or whatever your next section is. So the goal is to do your baby scratch not at the speed you were just at, but the speed you're going into. So if we do our setup pattern. So you could hear my baby scratch there is a swung baby. Okay, so a swung baby is going to be da 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 da. You do like a pause after the forward before the reverse. So it's like. It's like a longer forward and a quicker back. That's how you swing it. Now, I'll show you an example of not swinging it, and it should sound bad. That kind of made it sound like there's a bit of whiplash there when we went to the breakdown speed because the baby scratch was just not the right timing. So you want to make sure that you're kind of foreshadowing the speed that you're about to go to with your baby scratch. And this goes for pretty much any transition, but baby scratch is one where I find a lot of people just do a baby scratch like at any speed and don't really think about this little detail of it. But likewise, if you're doing a baby scratch transition back to the regular speed, then you would do it. It would be the other way. You wouldn't do it swung. You would do it the regular speed before you drop the beat. Yep. So you want to make sure that you're, baby scratching at normal and then drop it at normal speed. So the baby scratch transition, one of the easiest, most standard transitions. And again, with transitions, you're not trying to impress anybody. You're not trying to win a battle off a transition. So even though these are simple, like a baby scratch transition, a break transition, and a pause transition, these are like tried and true classic transitions. They still work. Sometimes you're gonna find this magic cool part of the beat and have a very unique transition, but other times you're just gonna do these, just like my cypress-hill juggle. I just hit the break and do a baby scratch, and that was it. And it was enough for that routine, at least. That's the baby scratch transition. Now we're gonna get into some loop transitions. The first one, we're going back to the original strobe juggle, and we're going to check the transition that Shortcut does in his Our Noise juggle. Yeah, so this one is like kind of a slow down loop where he basically he's going to a slower pattern, so he starts to bend the speed slower just with his looping before he gets into the actual breakdown speed. So again, this one's pretty simple, but it's actually sometimes kind of tricky to get it to flow right. But essentially what he's doing is looping.
Break it down. Break it down.
Like that. I did it on the wrong side though. Let me try that again. Yeah, so he's just adding space in the loop. Usually you would do it probably with one beat per side. So boom, that's one beat. Those two notes. You could try and do it with just the first note. Yeah, so you're just putting some you're kind of bending the speed down. You're slowing it down by putting a little bit of space between the loops. And again, you're trying to introduce like one element of your breakdown, which is just like the speed change. You're trying to introduce that before getting right into the the full breakdown pattern itself. So that is the slow down loop transition. Next up, this is one that Ian was alluding to. We have the swing or triplet loop transition. Yeah. So essentially, what I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Deus. What he does with his transition there is he basically like starts with a pattern of some sort. Like, and usually a typical way to get into this would be from a regular loop of 2 notes. And then you speed it up, but not double time. You're not going to go. You're going to just speed it up 50% into a triplet. So we're going to go. So we introduce the swing. In this case, we're not introducing a speed change yet. It actually sounds like it's speeding up. But we're introducing the swing or the triplet, which is the rhythm of our breakdown that we're getting into. We introduce that first, and then we go into the breakdown. Like that. Let me see. You can do it, I think, before the 1 as well. Yeah. That works as well. Yeah, usually any, either the 1 just before the 1, probably not on a snare too often. Let me see though. Break it down like break it, 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 break it. I take that back. That works too. Yeah. So it's basically just about introducing that triplet rhythm, da 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 da, like you would with your swing. You're introducing that, but you're just introducing it with the loop first. It even works like that, where you're not using the same thing on both sides. Break it down. Break it, break it. Like that. So that is the, what am I calling that? The triplet loop transition right there. So yeah, you're essentially just creating a triplet loop and then using that to transition into your breakdown. Next up on our transition bonanza, we have the reverse slowdown transition. This is a very cool, unique Babu one. He does this in a couple of routines, but it's very useful. Yeah. So it's just that little bit there at the end. He basically starts by looping and he does sort of introduce he introduces a bit of a triplet, but then the main transition is when he goes. Let me try on a different part of the beat. This one might sound better. Yeah. So, he essentially does. So he does sort of like a he does it with 2 hands. You don't have to, but But if you do it kind of at the right speed when you reverses, you try to pull it back as if you were doing a breakdown like that. So you can just practice it in a loop like that to try and get it flowing. So he's basically trying to introduce the tempo change just on the way back here, and then tap it into the one of the breakdown. So for this one, you would typically do it like, I think 6 loops, and then this, that'd be the 7 and 8. So yeah, so you catch that? I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll show you one more time. Oh, I'll do it better than that. I screwed up when I came back to the breakdown. Like that. So that is the reverse slowdown. So he sort of like bends the speed, like slows it down on the way back into the taps, and that it's just like, it's basically a 2-beat transition. He kind of slows down the beat over the 2 beats of the reverse and the tap back forward, and that just is just enough to blend the tempo back into the breakdown. And now we have 2 more transitions, and these are our other style transitions, a bit more spicy. The first one and the second one, they're both craze. The first one, so this one is like, again, pretty specific to this track, but he does like a power down by turning the turntable off. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to show you a slightly different variation, but this one's probably a little more versatile than the one that he did in his routine. So we're just going to get like a loop or setup pattern. Oops, I didn't switch sides. Yeah, so you're just gonna power it off and go. Try to get like 3 clean babies usually, so. Or 4. Yeah, so baby power down is what we're going to do for these. Now this one, there's a little trick to this that's going to help a lot if you're actually trying to do this. One thing you'll find when you start doing this is you're going to turn it off, and then you're going to start your breakdown. Oh no, my turntable is not working. It's turned off. So the trick to it is that you're going to, the muscle memory for a power down pattern. Like that. If you notice, so for this one, I'm using my offset hand, my fader hand. But I didn't do there, but what you'll notice is I'm turning it off and on in one motion. So it goes off on. So I'm like flicking it back and forth so that it's on right away. Right? So you can, like, as I was doing it there, like I'm getting it pretty fast, right? I'm able to keep a consistent loop, but still do the power downs. And it's all because I'm going off on, like one motion. You're just sort of flicking it back and forth. Sort of like a one-click flare on the switch. Yeah. So for this one, I would say probably the best kind of thing to practice would be. Do it on the 2, that gives you a bit more time, but do it on the 4th bar of something, and you're just sort of like trying to get a few clean like power downs, and then you start your breakdown. You know? So yeah, once again. Yeah. So that's the power down transition. And also like with all these transitions, you can like mix and match and you can combine them. You can do multiple together. Like you can do a power down transition with a like akikabi, like 2 taps per side with a baby scratch like at the end of that too. Like you can put 3 elements all together and make something like a little more unique or a little bit more musical or whatever. You don't just have to stick to like one thing, but yeah. Yeah, so okay, let's see. The last transition that we got, the last new technique thing for this whole boot camp, this is going to be a full routine. This is a new routine. Same year as the other juggle we just watched, but this one is the other juggle in that routine. This is Craze's Wave Twisters Razor Blade Alcohol Slide Juggle. And specifically the transition out of the breakdown is what we're going to focus on.
Now, let's start.
Yeah. So, yeah, super dope, crazy juggle. And yeah, the transition for that one that we're going to focus on, this one's very useful. And we actually do it in the routine. But basically just the Upfader Echo. So, just like a manual Upfader Echo. So this is one you'll have to practice. I usually try and get 4 echoes on the way down. Yeah. So getting that, but then getting set up into something else can be tricky. So yeah, that's how I would practice it, is basically do it like kind of like our setup pattern, but there's a lot of little moving parts there that it's trickier than you'd think to get the upfader up and everything and get ready to start the next setup pattern. Yeah, for this one, I'm hitting the break on this side too, so that the record doesn't go too far away. You don't have to do that, but for certain patterns, it might be easier. I'll try it without doing that. Yeah, it's totally doable without hitting the break. You just have to memorize a little bit how many rotations back. But yeah, so with or without the break, this is what I would practice. And the goal basically is to try to make it so that you get to your next pattern without too big of a gap. If you have too much of a silence, it sounds a little awkward. You want it to still sound like a tempo reset. You don't want it to sound like you forgot how to get to the next pattern. Yeah, but you can also use this one going back to the original speed. Like this. Yes, yeah, def switch. That's a good, yeah. So that's something that's a very cool thing to notice, that what Craze did. So yeah, basically what he did in his routine is he echoed out. And then he came back at a different speed, came back with it at -8. And the reason for that is because his next routine would beat match with the track played at -8. Yeah, that's something that I think is like a little bit underrated and a little bit like, it's one of those things that kind of breaks the rules, but a lot of people don't do as much nowadays. Like I think a lot of people like won't just like, like bring a track out and then bring it back in at like a way different speed or something. But I think that in this case, like it worked completely fine. And sometimes it's like you can do it, something like that. And it's like, it's something that makes it's like slightly weird by itself, but then the payoff of having it like flow so much better into the next part makes it worth it, yeah, so sometimes it's good to like think outside the box and be like, I'm gonna echo it out and then bring it back in like a few BPM slower or something, and use that like tempo reset as a way to do that. It doesn't always have to be like going into a breakdown or beat juggle pattern. Sometimes it's a transition to set up another transition that's about to happen between songs or between sections of your routine. So yeah, good observation, def switch. And with that's the end of our patterns. So we have we have 11 different transition patterns, and the full beat juggle. That has a pause. Can I do another one with a pause too? What do you mean, Gazoo? I did a few pause transitions at the start. Is that different than what you're thinking? Questions. This is question answer period. Mixer effects, absolutely. You can use those as a transition. Yeah, like in the the modern kind of DJing world.
Break it down. Break it down. Break like
Wrong speed, but you can easily do.
break it down.
You can use a effect, like an echo or something as a transition. That's like, yeah, obviously completely viable. But I would say, you want to learn your manual like Upfader echoes as well. There's times for both. Yeah. Sometimes sometimes it's just like, because when you use the echo, like you've got to take your hand off the fader or the record, and sometimes it's just easier to do it. Keep your hands on there. Sorry, Gazoo. What? Not at all. I'm not sure. Let me know what you're looking for. I would like to help or demonstrate, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're looking for right now. But yeah, any other questions about anything today, anything in the boot camp so far before we do homework? Yeah, that's a good question, Stu. If you're going to switch to 45, I would say usually a tempo reset is going to be in play. Like that's a classic. You stop the tempo, you reintroduce it at 45. A baby scratch transition can work if you kind of internalize what speed it's going to be at 45. So then you baby scratch it like extra fast. If you're going to go like. That's not a very good example, but something like that. Yeah. What else? Yeah, like I would say, so the tap transitions are not really going to be applied to the 45 so much, but all of the other transitions will apply to 45. Yeah. You can do push transitions. That's pretty advanced, but yeah, you can do that. Yep. And for double time, if you're doing double time patterns, normally you don't have to get too elaborate with transitions because double time patterns are beat matched to the original speed of the beat. So usually you can almost go straight into them, or you have like a little bit of a thing. MX26 said, am I going to launch a routine composition bootcamp? I was thinking about doing a scratch routine composition bootcamp. There's like a similar structure to this, but scratch routines, but it would also include Ableton and probably Serato Studio. For the people who don't own Ableton, include that for 1 week. But yeah, if there's interest in that, you guys can let me know. I'll also probably send out some info on that, but it won't be for a bit. I think this is the last boot camp for a bit because things are turning up with, I'm running DMC Canada. So there's a lot of events. I got a festival. I got some gigs. I'm going to be in Europe and in the US. So I'm not exactly sure, but it's going to, I'm going to look whenever I have a full month when I'm back home, but it's going to be a bit. More scratch camps. Nice. Well, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah. Nice. Nice, Guzzy. Yeah, any other questions about our content? I'm gonna load up the homework stuff, but yeah. Next week is we still do have one boot camp. So if you guys, if there's something after this, you're like, oh, I should have asked it. We have one next week, and it's just gonna be homework feedback. So please submit your homework videos. But instead of just being 30 seconds, you can submit a full routine, and I would like that. I'd like if you submit a full routine, whether it's going to be your full attempt at our beginner routine, or if you're going to do your own routine or something. Yeah, just submit full routine, and I'll give you in-depth feedback. And yeah, I think would be a good opportunity for anybody who's working on a juggle, like, either their first juggle, or if you're trying to make one that's like really solid, your first like real juggle, your first good juggle, then submit the whole thing. And yeah, I'll do a bit more like in-depth feedback. So so no, there won't be a 30-second limit. Let's say a 2-minute limit. We'll say a 2-minute limit.